Hello HEMA friends and welcome to this new video. So today I want to review the SIGI feather, the standard feather made by SIGI, which is a pretty interesting sword considering that it's the standard product made by them. Now I bought this kind of sword like 9 months ago, and after 6-7 months of waiting I received it. I fenced in the last 2 months with it, and only with it basically, almost. And I found it kind of enjoyable actually, and I am sticking to it now as the main sword which I am using. So let's talk about its features. Of course we have all the standard features of SIGI as always. So first of all, we have our sturdiness, like zero blur. I fence a lot of time, so like 4 or 5 days per week. As sturdy as any other SIGI feather as far as I know for now. The other common feature is the crossguard, which basically never rattles, at least in the greatest majority of the cases, I will say. This is for sure because there is some kind of tricky thing which stops the blade from moving inside of the handle when it receives a lot of blows over the crossguard. This is another feature which I suspect most of you love, because having the crossguard which rattles is a little boring sometimes. So this feather is slightly more agile than the concept. It is far more agile in many conditions than the King, and also of the SIGI sword. I will say that the only SIGI feather which is more agile than this one is the Gothic, if I remember well. Also the Maestro is pretty, let's say, heavy on the tip, so this one is basically more agile than almost every other SIGI feather. This feather of course pays for it with slightly lesser strength in your parry, so you have to deliver a little bit more structure, you have to be a little bit more strong and more intentional to parry, so you have to search for the parry while fencing with this one. You can't just go into some kind of I will say a safe position and expect that the sword will parry the blow by itself, such as for the King, for instance. With the King you basically reach a position and bam, the opponent's sword stops over it, and that's it. You don't have to search for a very strong and precise parry position with the King. Instead, with the feather you have to search for the parry in a better way. You have to reach a position which has a better structure, let's call it, compared to other SIGI feathers. So more agile in terms of recovering from cuts, more agile in delivering combination of blows. You have to search for the parry a little bit more, otherwise you will risk to receive the blow anyway sometimes. Not every single time, of course, but with this feather this kind of thing happens a little bit more. So this form of the shield is kind of cool, but it doesn't give a lot of pros compared to others, in a sense that you maybe would expect that the blade stops here sometimes, but of course it is not the case. I will say that it parries a little bit more your thumb, so you receive a little bit less of that boring tiny touches on your thumb that sometimes you don't know if you should consider an actual cut or not, you know, that kind of situations. So you receive lesser that kind of condition, especially if you fence like me. I generally tend to keep the thumb here, not here. So if you fence in this kind of way, it protects a little bit more your thumb, but it doesn't give you like any special feature compared to other feathers. It is not risky because it is very close to the handle, so you don't risk to hit someone with this kind of spiky part here, because generally speaking, if you hit someone, you will hit them with the crossguard first, and nothing, then you just hit them with the crossguard, and it is already scary enough if it happens sometimes on your shoulder or on the head, because you feel it. But anyway, because of this motivation, you will never hit someone with this kind of part here. It is basically, I will say, close to impossible or impossible. So there is no risk in this kind of spiky feature close to the crossguard. The way in which the sword is made, aesthetically speaking, is, to me, honestly, kind of enjoyable. So in terms of handling, as I mentioned, this sword is on the nimble side, but is on the nimble side of SIGI feathers, because you have to remember that SIGI feathers on average tend to be on the strong side of feathers, so they are the kind of sword that parries in a strong way. They are made, generally speaking, for a kind of strong parry riposte game with people that hits you in a decently intentioned way. This kind of swords tend to go in this kind of direction. If you fence with feathers of other makers which weight less, generally speaking, or have the point of balance even farther backward, you will notice that you will be the strong one while fencing. So remember the thing which is said, that this is on the nimble side of feathers. It feels lighter. It feels lighter compared to other SIGI feathers. It is the kind of sword which I like, generally speaking. So I tend to not like a lot that swords which are doing whatever you ask them to do, even the most stupid things. I like that swords which have some kind of soul, as I generally say, so that if you make them rotate in a certain way, they go for that rotation. And SIGI feathers, generally speaking, if we're not taking in consideration the light, tend to represent this kind of sword. So this is why they tend to be also, it is connected, every quality is connected, they tend to be on the heavy side of the feathers, generally speaking, compared to other makers. Still, even that considered, they are, funny enough, one of the best feather in terms of safety on the market, and this is true for every single SIGI feather, because of the way in which the tip is made, because of the flex of this kind of blades, and because, yes, they tend to hit strong, sometimes with the cut, but generally speaking, it is not a very strong blow. So it is a blow of a feather, first of all, and the way in which the blade is made tend to not transfer too much energy compared to other fencing swords which are used. This one especially because, as I mentioned, it is on the nimble side of SIGI feathers, hits lesser than others. So if you receive a hit of a king, it's very strong. If you receive a hit of this one, it's far lesser strong than that one. So I will say that it's a pretty good sword. I tend to enjoy it because now I tend to be in search of more nimble kind of plays in my fencing, compared to having like very wide games which require necessarily a lot of rotations of your hands. And this feather answers back to this kind of necessity pretty well, I will say, without losing that kind of aspects which I mentioned about a sword with a soul and that kind of thing. So it still rotates in a very good way, it is still present in your parry, even if you have to search for them a little bit more. So it's pretty enjoyable, and that's why I say it is halfway between other feathers. And I think that in terms of feathers which you can buy as the standard model, this is the best one that you can find around, but it is also the one which most probably costs the most, so it is an investment. Yeah, so enjoyable feather, nothing magic about it as others such as the king or whatever. Not tricky at all. You receive a nimble sword which does everything in a pretty decent way. It doesn't shine in anything, which is what you would expect from a sword for beginners. It doesn't have to be hard to use in any regards, and so that's a sword which I would advise for basically every beginner which has enough money to spend in this kind of activity to buy it. Very good, people. So I hope you will enjoy this review and you will find it useful in some ways. Thanks for watching as always, and see you next time.